Four fishermen set sail from the tranquil shores of San Diego, their boat quietly slipping into the misty ocean, never to return. For decades, their mysterious disappearance haunted the coastal town, slowly fading into legend. But 33 years later, their boat, the Esperanza, suddenly reappears, drifting silently into the harbor, carrying secrets hidden deep within its walls. As investigators step aboard, they uncover a hidden room sealed for decades, and inside lies clues that promise to finally reveal the truth. What really happened that night at sea? San Diego, March of 1982. A city quietly embraced by the sea, wrapped in whispers of salt and softened by blankets of mist that wandered in from the endless Pacific. Each morning began as if hesitant, the sun uncertain, hidden behind a pale curtain of fog, reluctant to fully awaken a city whose soul seemed stitched to the waves. Here, life pulsed slowly, rhythmic and eternal, much like the gentle roll of the tides that endlessly caressed the shoreline, whispering stories only the ocean could fully know. Jacob was the soul of the group, a man whose quiet strength was a constant, steady flame, a reassurance in times of uncertainty. At 46, his eyes mirrored a calm ocean on clear days, deep and wise, reflecting experiences gathered through years spent battling waves and storms. He was the anchor, the voice of reason. At home he was beloved, a gentle husband to Sarah and a devoted father to his two daughters, Emily and Clara, who saw him as their hero. Miguel was Jacob's opposite in every conceivable way. At 38, he was a vibrant burst of laughter and wit, his presence a cheerful melody against even the dullest of days. Still single and without family ties, Miguel found his place in the world through friendships. His jokes, often masking subtle insecurities, had a way of drawing people close, making them forget their troubles, if only briefly. Yet beneath the jovial exterior, Miguel yearned quietly for something deeper, a sense of belonging he never openly expressed. Arthur, a few years younger at 34, was the enigma among them. His eyes held shadows that he rarely let others explore. He spoke little, observed much, his silence not born from disdain but from a guarded heart, carrying secrets that felt heavy with every passing year. Arthur had arrived in San Diego quietly, years before, and quickly became an inseparable part of this small circle of fishermen. Though introverted and reserved, he possessed a loyalty fierce enough to rival even Jacob's steadiness. And then there was Tom, the eldest at 52, a man whose life had been carved by both the generosity and the cruelty of the sea. Tom's wife had passed away 10 years prior, leaving him solitary, his sole comfort now being the familiar embrace of the ocean he both loved and respected deeply. His hands bore the marks of a lifetime spent wrestling ropes and sails, skin roughened by salt and sun, but his heart remained tender, quietly holding on to the memories of love long past. Together, they were the crew of Esperanza, a sturdy vessel, worn but reliable, her wood weathered by the years, the paint faded but dignified, reflecting the pride and trust her crew placed in her. The morning of their departure was no different. From countless others, yet the air held something subtle and unsettling, like a note slightly off-key in a familiar song. The harbor buzzed softly in those early hours, fishermen preparing their nets and checking gear, familiar routines unfolding with practiced ease. Jacob moved methodically, ensuring everything was secure, while Miguel joked loudly, his laughter echoing brightly above the gentle murmurs of the docks. Arthur silently inspected every corner of the Esperanza, as if memorizing each plank and rusted hinge. Tom stood on the edge, looking out to the horizon, quiet as always, whispering softly to himself, a habit born from years of solitude and reflection. Family members had gathered, an ordinary yet cherished ritual of departure. Jacob embraced Sarah warmly, lingering longer than usual, whispering reassurances in her ear that even he did not fully believe. His daughters clung to his legs, giggling innocently, unaware of the apprehension etched subtly into their father's expression. Miguel playfully waved at everyone, blowing exaggerated kisses to the small crowd of friends, eliciting chuckles. and rolling eyes. Arthur's quiet nod was met by knowing, gentle smiles, his solitude respected by those who cared deeply, yet understood little. Tom exchanged brief glances with familiar faces, silent acknowledgments that spoke volumes in their simplicity. As the Esperanza drifted from the dock, a cool wind stirred, swirling around the boat, carrying whispers no one could quite decipher. Clouds gathered softly, hiding the sun, draping the morning in tones of muted silver and gray. The sea seemed oddly subdued, as though holding its breath, aware of something the men could not sense. The last glimpses from shore saw the fishermen silhouetted against the horizon, shadows fading into the embrace of ocean mists. Hours later, as daylight surrendered gently to dusk, family members awaited Esperanza's return with a practiced patience, exchanging quiet jokes and gentle reassurances. Yet, as the twilight deepened and the harbor grew emptier, the familiar silhouette of Esperanza failed to materialize. Anxiety spread quietly, murmurs of concern rippling softly among those gathered at the dock. By nightfall, that concern hardened into fear, tangible and undeniable. Searchlights pierced the darkness, boats hurriedly set forth, scanning the black waters, voices calling into the emptiness, unanswered. As night slipped into the following day, the search intensified, the community galvanized by shared dread and stubborn hope. But the ocean remained silent, betraying nothing, withholding all answers beneath its endless waves. Days melted into weeks, hope gradually dimmed, yet stubbornly persisted in quiet corners of the city. Families stood each evening at the shoreline, eyes straining toward the vast, indifferent horizon, hearts silently pleading for miracles they scarcely dared hope for. Sarah held her daughters closer each passing day, answering their innocent questions with gentle reassurances she herself no longer believed. Miguel's absence left a hole filled awkwardly by silence where laughter once rang freely. Arthur's quiet presence became louder in its absence, his few words now deeply missed by those who knew him best. And Tom's solitude became a haunting presence, his empty home a silent testament to love lost twice. First his beloved wife, now the sea itself had claimed him too. San Diego mourned quietly. The loss felt deeply, rippling softly through the fabric of the city, subtly reshaping it. Life continued, reluctantly. Routines resumed, but something intangible yet profound had changed. The fishermen had vanished, as suddenly as a breath stolen by the wind, their fates sealed within the depths of an ocean that guarded its secrets jealously. Weeks stretched into months, months blended seamlessly into years, and slowly, the Esperanza and her crew became legend. Names whispered softly among fishermen at dusk, cautionary tales shared by worried mothers and aging sailors. Yet through it all, the ocean never spoke, never returned even a fragment of the truth it guarded beneath its waves. On quiet evenings, Sarah would stand silently with her daughters, now older, the innocence of childhood giving way to the gentle sorrow of understanding. They would gaze out at the sea, imagining Esperanza appearing magically from the mist, bringing with it answers, relief, closure. But always the horizon remained stubbornly empty, unyielding, offering nothing but silence in return. And in the stillness of those evenings, beneath fading skies colored softly by dusk, San Diego held its collective breath, knowing deep within its heart that something had been lost forever, taken by the sea that, though life-giving, could also steal, with a gentleness as cruel as it was quiet. Standing there, watching the empty waves lap gently upon the shore, the community knew something terrible had happened to Esperanza, a silent understanding heavy and unspoken. And so they waited, because waiting was all they could do. Waited for answers the ocean might never give. San Diego, like the patient rhythm of the tides themselves, moved quietly forward. Years turned into decades, eroding memories, just as the ocean slowly wore down rocks into sand. Time passed quietly, almost unnoticed, yet it transformed the small, coastal community profoundly. What once had been a lingering, tangible grief gradually softened into quiet acceptance. each sunrise over the Pacific smoothing the sharp edges of pain into the soft melancholy of memory. The story of Esperanza and the four lost fishermen faded from sharp headlines into quiet whispers. Names that once sparked conversations of hope and despair became hushed mentions among old-timers, nostalgic reminders whispered in taverns and docks at twilight. The city slowly drifted forward, gently leaving the past in its wake. Sarah, Jacob's beloved widow, carried on as best she could, though the early years were the hardest. Her daughters grew into strong, compassionate women, shaped deeply by the quiet strength their mother embodied. Still, each passing anniversary stirred a familiar ache as she stood quietly by the sea, whispering private messages into the breeze, hoping somehow her words might find Jacob in the unknowable depths beyond the horizon. Miguel's absence left an emptiness that was felt most deeply at the harbor, where his laughter once echoed, filling the spaces now occupied by silence. His friends and acquaintances carried on, yet they missed the cheerful jokes that had once brightened their days. Occasionally, someone would tell one of his old stories, bringing smiles softened by nostalgia and tempered by the sad realization that he would never again join them. Arthur's disappearance had left behind more questions than answers. Those who knew him wondered quietly about his past, speculating occasionally, but never knowing enough to find closure. His solitude became legend, deepening the mystery surrounding him, giving rise to stories and theories quietly passed around. During long nights when fishermen gathered to watch the sea, pondering silently what became of the quiet, reserved man who left nothing but unanswered questions behind. Tom, the wise veteran of the sea, was perhaps mourned most privately. Without family to openly grieve him, it was the community itself that adopted his memory. His small cottage by the water sat empty, its walls faded by the sun, a quiet monument to a man who once found peace amid ocean storms. Locals would occasionally leave flowers on the porch steps, a tender gesture ensuring Tom's solitary life would never be forgotten completely. As the years drifted onward, those intimately connected to the lost fisherman quietly adapted to the slow healing brought by time. But one man never truly let go. George Brennan, the detective assigned to the original investigation, remained haunted by his inability to bring answers to those who deserved them most. Now retired, George lived alone in a small house overlooking Mission Bay. His days passed quietly, often spent reflecting on the unanswered mysteries of his career. Among these, the Esperanza remained stubbornly unresolved, clinging to him like an old injury that ached with every passing storm. Each morning, George sat by his window, watching waves silently caress the shoreline, wondering what truths lay hidden beneath their surface. He kept detailed files from the case locked away in a cabinet, a testament to both his hope and his regret. The unresolved mystery of Esperanza had become an integral part of his solitude, echoing softly through his empty house. It was on a gentle morning in July of 2015 that the silence of nearly 3 decades was suddenly, impossibly, broken. The Esperanza returned, drifting slowly toward shore, appearing through the morning mist like a ghost ship emerging from legend. Its wooden hull, battered but unbroken, glistened with seawater, looking much as it did 33 years before, yet carrying with it an unmistakable air of melancholy mystery. The first to spot the boat was a young fisherman, whose startled cries quickly drew others to the harbor's edge. Word spread rapidly, whispers becoming shouts, excitement tinged with disbelief. Soon, an eager, anxious crowd lined the docks, watching in awe and fear as the Esperanza was carefully guided into the harbor. News crews and curious townspeople gathered swiftly, cameras flashing, voices murmuring with disbelief. The impossible return of the boat reignited long-buried emotions in the hearts of those who had spent years quietly healing from a wound never truly closed. Sarah stood quietly among the crowd, her now-grown daughters beside her, eyes wide and hearts trembling. Memories flooded back with forceful clarity, sweeping away the delicate peace they had cultivated through years of quiet resignation. George Brennan was summoned urgently from his solitude, his heart racing as he drove quickly toward the harbor. His thoughts swirling chaotically, wondering how reality had suddenly become stranger than fiction. Stepping onto the Esperanza after so many years felt surreal. Each footstep a journey backward in time, each creak and groan of the wood bringing forth a flood of memories he had carried for decades. The boat's interior was eerily preserved, frozen in a moment long past. Nets lay tangled exactly as they'd been left, tools rusted yet neatly placed, personal items untouched by human hands for decades. The cabin, filled with an unsettling quiet, held traces of lives abruptly interrupted. It felt as if the boat itself had been locked in silent waiting, suspended in an impossible state between memory and reality. Yet something had changed. In the sleeping quarters, where the fishermen had rested countless times, investigators found a strange anomaly. A metal door, heavy and rusted, concealed cleverly within the wall. Its presence was inexplicable, never recorded in original investigations. It was as if Esperanza herself had hidden away a secret, preserving it beneath layers of rust and corrosion, awaiting the right moment to reveal the truth. George studied the door closely, feeling the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with uncovering a crucial piece of evidence. The investigators worked tirelessly, attempting to open the rusted barrier that refused stubbornly to yield its secrets. With every failed attempt, tension grew palpably, curiosity shifting toward anxiety. Could this hidden door finally explain what happened decades ago, or would it only deepen the mystery further? Hours passed, tools replaced by stronger equipment, urgency growing as the sun began to set, bathing the harbor in golden hues. Outside, the crowd lingered anxiously, their murmurs hushed, anticipation woven through the gathering like a quiet, anxious melody. Sarah stood motionless, holding her daughter's hands tightly, hearts pounding with unspoken hope and dread. Inside the Esperanza, investigators persisted with stubborn determination. Finally, under the forceful pressure of powerful tools, the door began to groan, metal reluctantly bending against decades of resistance. George leaned closer, heart hammering, breath shallow. This moment, he knew, might bring answers or merely plunge everyone deeper into confusion. As hinges creaked and rust crumbled, the door slowly gave way, inch by agonizing inch. Investigators paused, hands trembling, faces pale, eyes wide with uncertainty. George Brennan, breathing deeply, felt the weight of years press heavily upon him. Silence enveloped the boat, heavy, expectant, as every breath seemed to stop at once, the world itself holding still, awaiting revelation. With a final, resonating screech, the metal door surrendered at last, slowly opening toward a darkness undisturbed for 33 years. Everyone present held their breath, hearts suspended in collective suspense, eyes locked onto the dark space behind the door, minds spinning wildly with anticipation. In that exact moment, as the door finally revealed its secret, everyone knew their lives would change irrevocably, for better or worse. Whatever lay beyond the shadows was about to rewrite the quiet history of Esperanza and the 4 fishermen lost long ago, bringing forth truths perhaps better left forgotten, yet impossible to ignore. The gathered crowd, families and investigators, remained frozen in anticipation, each second stretching infinitely. The door opened just wide enough to glimpse into the unknown, and there, on the brink of revelation, beneath fading daylight and in the quiet embrace of the patient sea, the city of San Diego waited anxiously, holding tightly onto the silence before the storm of truth that was finally, after decades of waiting, about to break. The door swung open slowly, heavy and resistant, like the weary hand of time finally releasing its long-held secret. A wave of stale air, rich with salt and forgotten memories, drifted out of the darkened space, enveloping the investigators in the scent of history itself. It felt like breathing the past, inhaling decades lost to the endless patience of the sea. For a brief, suspended moment, no one moved, as though fearing even the slightest breath might disturb the fragile truths held within. George Brennan stepped forward cautiously, heart pounding, eyes wide with anxious curiosity. As he passed through the threshold, his flashlight pierced the darkness, revealing walls painted thickly with shadows and sorrow. His breath caught softly in his chest, The small hidden room was filled with traces of life abruptly frozen. Photographs, curled and faded, covered the walls. Faces once bright with youthful optimism now gazed out mournfully, their images barely recognizable beneath layers of grime and salt. It was as though time itself had tried to erase them, gently blurring identities until only ghostly outlines remained. In one corner lay personal belongings scattered haphazardly, Jacob's reading glasses, lenses fogged and cracked, a watch that had stopped at exactly 3:15, forever marking some forgotten moment. Nearby, Miguel's pocket knife, rusted yet still proudly engraved with his initials, rested atop a small stack of tattered playing cards, once a source of endless jokes and laughter among the crew. As the beam of George's flashlight moved across the walls, faint scribbles emerged from the darkness, words scratched hastily into wood, as though desperation itself had guided trembling hands. Each phrase was fragmented, incomplete, like whispers carried away by an unforgiving wind. "We saw them," read one, followed by another, even more ominous. "They're coming again tonight." The investigators exchanged tense glances, the weight of unanswered questions heavy upon them. Family members stood silently near the doorway, eyes fixed on the remnants of lives once intimately intertwined with their own. Sarah, clutching tightly to her daughter's hands, felt her heart shatter anew as her eyes caught sight of Jacob's handwriting, hastily scratched, familiar even after all these years. A faint sob escaped her, quiet yet sharp enough to pierce the silence, echoing softly through the cramped room. Carefully, George stepped toward a battered table at the room's center, where lay scattered pages, yellowed, brittle, edges eaten, away by years of salt and neglect. He carefully lifted one, squinting to decipher faded handwriting. The words belonged unmistakably to Arthur, whose quiet mystery had only deepened through the decades. Arthur's notes were disjointed, erratic, capturing brief glimpses of days spent trapped in fear and confusion. "They're watching us," he wrote cryptically. "Something terrible, never meant to see it." Another entry, barely legible, read hauntingly, "We must hide, stay silent. They'll come again." As George read, investigators huddled closer, murmuring theories in quiet, cautious tones. Gradually, suspicion formed, taking shape from the incomplete pieces of Arthur's frightened narrative. Words like contraband and illegal cargo whispered softly through the room, conjuring images of clandestine exchanges beneath moonlit waves, criminal acts witnessed by innocent men whose only crime had been venturing too close. Despite the tension, lighter moments inevitably surfaced. One young investigator squinted helplessly at a particularly illegible note, turning it upside down, sideways, scratching his head comically until laughter softly broke through the solemnity. "Either this says danger awaits us," he joked dryly, "or dancing walruses. Honestly, both seem equally plausible." The brief laughter offered relief, but quickly faded, swallowed once more by the grim reality surrounding them. Each object and word unearthed carried emotional weight, prompting memories long dormant. Miguel's pocket knife elicited quiet smiles, tinged with sadness, reminding everyone of his laughter that once filled rooms effortlessly. Jacob's glasses, broken and abandoned, symbolized sharply the shattered lives left behind, their dreams forever disrupted. Hours passed as each item was meticulously examined, photographed, carefully catalogued. But the most compelling discovery was yet to come. Beneath scattered papers, partially hidden, lay a small, battered notebook. George picked it up gently, feeling the worn leather and knowing instinctively it belonged to Arthur. Carefully, almost reverently, he opened it, pages fragile beneath his fingertips. Arthur's diary was incomplete, sentences interrupted abruptly, thoughts fragmented by fear or urgency. Yet its words painted a chilling portrait. March 17th. We saw boats, late night, black sails, no lights. Later entries grew darker. They followed us, watching always. Then, suddenly, his final entries became increasingly desperate, handwriting shaky and panicked. "Must hide deeper, nowhere safe. Something terrible out there. George felt his throat tighten. The words were ambiguous yet deeply troubling, hinting at something witnessed by accident, something sinister that changed everything. He moved carefully through the pages, each entry heightening the tension, pulling him closer to a truth just beyond his grasp. Finally, he paused at the last written page, a single sentence, stark and abrupt. Must warn others. If we don't, return search south, Ilha do Sul. The rest of the page was blank, the thought left chillingly unfinished, dangling like a rope abruptly severed. George's mind raced. Ilha do Sul. A small island, obscure, barely noticeable on most maps. What possible connection could it hold to the fate of the Esperanza? Arthur's cryptic warning lingered ominously, echoing softly through George's thoughts. Could there truly have been survivors, hidden away somewhere remote, forgotten by time? He carefully closed the diary, feeling a heavy responsibility resting upon him, the weight of decades and unanswered questions pressing deeply. Turning slowly, he shared Arthur's words aloud with the investigators and families gathered closely around. The room filled instantly with anxious murmurs and cautious hope, the atmosphere electric with uncertainty. Sarah's eyes glistened with renewed emotion, hope flickering softly yet fearfully within them. The possibility of survivors meant a fragile chance that not all had been irrevocably lost, that somewhere, hidden from the world, Arthur, or even Jacob, Miguel, or Tom, might still wait for rescue, for answers, for home. George Brennan understood, perhaps better than anyone, the depth of what they had uncovered. The Esperanza had guarded its secrets closely, preserving fragments of truth beneath layers of salt and rust, waiting patiently for the right moment to release them. Now, with Arthur's diary in hand, the puzzle began to slowly unfold, offering glimpses of a narrative darker and more complex than any had imagined. As night fell gently over San Diego, the room remained filled with restless whispers, investigators debating quietly the next steps, theories intermingling softly, uncertainty palpable. Yet amidst the anxious speculation, George remained focused on Arthur's incomplete words. The cryptic message referencing Ilha do Sul and survivors, words that could rewrite history itself, reconnecting past and present in ways none had anticipated. Outside, waves brushed gently against Esperanza's hull, a soft, rhythmic whisper that carried promises of revelations yet to come. The ocean, silent keeper of countless secrets, seemed finally willing to surrender at least one, the truth of what had happened decades ago, beneath stars indifferent and waves relentless, when four fishermen unwittingly crossed paths with something terrible, something powerful enough to change lives forever. Standing quietly among murmurs and shadows, George Brennan knew their journey was only beginning, that the path toward truth lay hidden somewhere distant, perhaps on a forgotten island to the south, and somewhere beneath the whispering waves, the ghosts of the Esperanza watched silently, waiting patiently for their stories to finally be heard. Days later, beneath a sky bruised with clouds that held their secrets tightly, a small investigative team gathered quietly on the docks of San Diego. Their destination was Ilha do Sul, a tiny, forgotten piece of land that appeared as little more than an ink stain on faded maps. Even seasoned sailors shook their heads uncertainly, murmuring vague warnings about rough currents and hidden reefs. But the words found in Arthur's diary could not be ignored. And so, with hearts heavy yet hopeful, the team set out upon the restless Pacific, following whispers that had waited decades to be heard. The journey itself was long and uncertain, filled with the tension of unanswered questions. Waves rocked their vessel gently at first, like hesitant hands pushing them toward their fate. As they moved farther south, however, the ocean grew unpredictable, surging suddenly beneath their feet, mirroring the anxious currents flowing through each passenger's thoughts. Conversations were hushed, speculative whispers broken by forced humor and nervous laughter, attempts to ease a burden too heavy for silence alone to carry. George Brennan stood quietly at the bow, eyes fixed upon the horizon. The sea ahead stretched endlessly, both inviting and foreboding, its expanse hiding the truth he had chased for half a lifetime. He pondered silently, reflecting upon his first days investigating the Esperanza's disappearance, those initial hours filled with frantic searches and desperate hope that slowly faded into helpless acceptance. Now, decades later, the elusive truth seemed finally within his reach. Behind him, the relatives of the fishermen shared hushed conversations, weaving together fragments of memories and long-held questions. Sarah spoke softly of Jacob's quiet evenings at home, reading by lamplight, always calm, always steady. Her daughter smiled faintly, recalling bedtime stories whispered gently by a father whose voice had been their lullaby. Yet beneath these fond recollections lay subtle shadows. Jacob's quiet concern in the days before departure, his unspoken anxieties sensed but never explained. Miguel's absence echoed differently. Old friends recalled the man who filled empty spaces with laughter, yet admitted softly how little they truly knew beneath his easy charm. Miguel's humor had masked insecurities quietly buried, rarely revealed. It raised questions now. Had he hidden something deeper behind his joyful facade? Arthur remained an enigma, his past now the source of renewed speculation. Friends remembered how he kept conversations brief, answers always guarded. No one knew exactly why he'd come to San Diego, only that he'd arrived alone and rarely spoke of home. Secrets, once accepted quietly, now became points of whispered curiosity, threading uneasily through the passengers' thoughts. Tom, whose loss had seemed simplest, quietly complicated itself as former neighbors recalled strange late-night visitors. Brief exchanges held discreetly beneath shadows. Had Tom, too, harbored secrets unknown even to those closest to him? Such reflections deepened their uncertainty as the vessel sailed onward, pulled steadily toward Ilha do Sul. Night fell slowly, stars appearing hesitantly through drifting clouds, silver lights guiding them southward. Sleep proved elusive, dreams punctuated by memories and uneasy imaginings of what awaited them. At dawn, the silhouette of a small island finally emerged from the lingering mist, its shores jagged and unwelcoming, crowned by dense forests reaching skyward like silent sentinels guarding hidden truths. The team disembarked carefully, their footsteps uncertain, each breath holding tightly to fragile hope and cautious fear. Exploring the island proved challenging. Overgrown paths hinted faintly at previous habitation, remnants of makeshift shelters and scattered objects indicating someone had endured here, surviving far longer than seemed possible. Rusted cans, old fishing nets, and weathered wooden crates lay quietly, each telling muted stories of perseverance and isolation. Investigators carefully documented these discoveries, their hearts quickening as evidence mounted. Someone had indeed survived here, perhaps desperately waiting for rescue that never arrived. Moments of levity softened tense interactions among the investigators. A local guide, recruited hastily from a nearby fishing village, tripped awkwardly over tangled roots, grumbling humorously about nature's conspiracies against him. His casual jokes about island hospitality earned quiet laughter from a team grateful for temporary relief from heavy emotions. Amid the remnants, an elderly man approached slowly, emerging silently from the shadows of trees, his appearance startling investigators who believed the island long abandoned. His weathered face was kind yet cautious, eyes narrowed slightly in wary appraisal. Through hesitant conversation, they learned he had lived alone for decades, seeking solitude away from a world he had once found too harsh. As their trust slowly grew, investigators asked if he remembered others who might have stayed here long. Ago. The old man's eyes softened gently with distant memories. Yes, he nodded thoughtfully, recalling a quiet, reserved man whose name he never learned, but whose presence lingered vividly in his memory. A man who spoke rarely, whose eyes carried shadows heavy with untold stories. George's heart surged. The description matched Arthur precisely, igniting fragile hope. Carefully, investigators asked more, gently prompting memories long dormant within the elderly man. His recollections, though fragmented, painted a clear picture. A survivor had indeed lived here, hidden away by choice or necessity, watched over silently by the island's quiet guardian. Questions multiplied, intertwining quietly. Had Arthur truly survived all these years, living unnoticed, forgotten? If so, why remain hidden, silent even to those who offered kindness? The old man offered no answers, merely gentle shrugs and thoughtful glances toward paths disappearing into forest depths. Eventually, as daylight began fading softly toward dusk, the elderly islander rose, inviting them carefully toward his humble shelter hidden among the trees. Inside, the simplicity of his life spoke of quiet contentment and peaceful solitude. Yet among modest belongings lay something astonishing, a single photograph, grainy yet unmistakably clear. Hands trembling slightly, George lifted the photograph closer, studying it carefully, heart hammering wildly. The image revealed a man, older, clearly weathered by years spent hidden from the world, yet undeniably familiar. Arthur. His eyes, still carrying quiet shadows, gazed directly outward, as though staring across decades, silently awaiting discovery. The room fell utterly silent. Sarah's breath caught sharply, daughters gripping her hands tightly, emotions swirling between hope and disbelief. The photograph offered undeniable proof of survival, raising profound questions no one yet dared voice aloud. Arthur was alive, hidden, isolated yet undeniably real. George Brennan gently placed the photograph down, breath heavy with revelation, eyes meeting those gathered silently around him. Decades of mystery now suddenly opened toward possibilities both thrilling and frightening. If Arthur had survived, then perhaps others had as well. Yet deeper, more unsettling questions lingered heavily. Why had Arthur chosen isolation over rescue? What had frightened him into silence for decades? Outside, the island settled quietly into twilight, shadows stretching softly across paths Arthur himself might have walked, his presence lingering tangibly. Waves murmured gently against shores that had hidden secrets for so long, secrets now slowly surfacing, ready at last to reveal truths carefully guarded beneath tides and silence. As night fell softly, stars emerged, illuminating pathways once forgotten, guiding investigators onward into truths long awaited. The island, small and obscure, had finally surrendered its secret. A photograph, quiet proof that Arthur lived, hidden from a world he'd once chosen to leave behind. Standing quietly beneath stars now brighter, clearer, George Brennan felt the ocean's gentle pull, whispering softly promises of answers still to come. Answers waiting patiently for discovery along paths Arthur had chosen. Paths leading finally toward truths both beautiful and heartbreaking. Truths carefully hidden, yet longing now for the gentle freedom of revelation. The island was a silent place, lost in time, wrapped softly by whispers of waves that gently brushed its shores. Dense forests stretched deep inland, ancient trees standing tall and solemn, guardians of solitude. Here the sun rose reluctantly, painting the sky in muted pastels, colors dulled by the mist that lingered like forgotten dreams. Each dawn seemed to hesitate, as if the island itself wished to remain hidden, untouched by the outside world. The investigators moved carefully along narrow paths, stepping softly, breathing shallowly, feeling intruders in a world preserved like a memory in amber. Here, isolation had become something tangible, an invisible barrier that held secrets tightly, protecting them from prying eyes. George Brennan led the way, heart beating with quiet anticipation, every step closer to uncovering truths hidden by years of silence. At last, through a clearing, the humble outline of a weathered hut appeared, its wooden walls faded silver by years of sun and rain. It stood alone, proudly defiant against the elements, a testament to human resilience and solitude. Nearby, a small garden grew stubbornly, carefully tended, proof of life continuing despite adversity, a silent defiance of nature's indifferent hand. And there, quietly watching from the doorway, stood Arthur, older now, shoulders slightly bent, hair thin and gray as ocean mist. Time had left deep marks upon him, carving lines of experience and sorrow into his weathered face. His eyes, however, still held their familiar quiet intensity, deep shadows hinting at memories carried silently for decades. For a long moment, no words were spoken. Arthur studied the investigators with quiet suspicion, tension palpable yet unspoken. Finally, George stepped forward, speaking gently, voice filled with careful respect. "Arthur, we've been searching for you. Your friends, your family, they need to know what happened." Arthur hesitated, eyes narrowing softly, considering carefully. His voice, when it came, was rough, unused to conversation, like a door creaking slowly open after years of rusted silence. "Some stories are better left untold," he murmured cautiously, yet stepped back, gesturing quietly for them to enter. Inside, the small space was neat, ordered, a careful arrangement of objects gathered over decades, small, precious tokens that spoke volumes about Arthur's quiet endurance. A faded photograph of the crew, their smiles bright with innocence, rested gently on a handmade shelf, a fragile reminder of companionship lost to time. Arthur noticed George studying it closely, and a rare, fleeting smile softened his features. "We were brothers out there," he whispered, voice heavy with memories. Gently prompted by George, Arthur began slowly, reluctantly, to speak of that fateful night decades past. His words were hesitant, fragmented, offering glimpses of truth while keeping the core carefully hidden. "We went further out than usual. Jacob wanted a better catch. But we saw something we shouldn't have. Ships, no lights, men unloading something, dark into boats." Arthur's eyes narrowed in remembered fear, his voice trembling slightly. "They chased us. We hid, but they knew we'd seen them." Then he paused abruptly, shaking his head firmly, signaling the end of his willingness to reveal more. The investigators exchanged quiet glances, frustration mixing with understanding. Arthur's silence, shaped by decades of isolation, was not easily broken. They settled in patiently, knowing trust would take time. Days passed quietly, investigators gently coaxing Arthur, carefully building fragile bridges toward trust. Amid tense exchanges were moments of unexpected levity. Arthur stubbornly corrected younger investigators fumbling over tasks he mastered long ago, humor briefly illuminating his solitude-hardened features. "You city folks wouldn't survive a day out here," he grumbled affectionately as one struggled awkwardly to start a fire. Yet mostly, Arthur's existence was a solemn dance with isolation, a careful choreography between memory and survival. He rose with the sun, tended his garden, gathered wood, routines woven intricately through years of solitude. Each task carried quiet dignity, a subtle defiance of loneliness. Occasionally he'd pause, gazing silently toward the sea, eyes shadowed by profound private grief. Slowly, Arthur revealed more pieces of his past. Nights aboard the Esperanza had been filled with camaraderie, yet shadows lingered always at the edges, unspoken anxieties, quiet fears. Miguel's laughter hid a quiet sadness Arthur alone had sensed. Jacob's confidence, once reassuring, had turned strained in their final days, as though burdened by secret worries. Even Tom, solid and reliable, had shown uncharacteristic restlessness, pacing the deck anxiously when he thought others slept. Arthur's quiet voice trembled slightly when recalling their final days aboard Esperanza, days spent hiding, fear thickening the air they breathed. They spoke little, rationed food carefully, each creak of the boat amplifying their dread. Jacob had tried maintaining calm, yet his face betrayed quiet despair. Miguel attempted jokes, each falling flat against a silence too heavy for laughter. Tom kept watch ceaselessly, eyes scanning the horizon for threats unseen yet deeply felt. Then Arthur spoke slowly, reluctantly, of the night a violent storm struck, winds screaming, waves towering fiercely, an ocean enraged as if punishing them for their intrusion. Amid the chaos, Esperanza fractured, tearing them apart. Arthur recalled gripping desperately to floating debris, hearing distant frantic calls quickly silenced by waves. Eventually, the ocean grew quiet, indifferent, leaving him alone beneath, stars coldly watching from above. His rescue came days later, fishermen quietly taking him ashore, providing food and shelter. Yet Arthur chose isolation afterward, convinced the threat they'd faced remained. Fear and guilt drove him silently away, convinced hiding meant safety, not only for himself but also for those unaware of the darkness he believed still lurked beyond the waves. George listened carefully, piecing fragments together, sensing Arthur's story remained incomplete, guarded still by fears deeply rooted. Investigators quietly debated next steps. Patient yet increasingly anxious for truth, Arthur refused stubbornly to release fully. One evening, as the island fell softly into twilight, George found Arthur quietly tending his garden. Approaching. Gently, George spoke with quiet conviction. "Arthur, your silence protects no one now. Families have waited decades for closure. Your story matters. Your truth deserves hearing." Arthur paused thoughtfully, hands quiet in the earth, eyes distant, yet filled with emotion. Finally, he nodded gently, breath trembling softly, surrendering at last to trust carefully earned. Rising slowly, he faced George directly, eyes holding decades of silence, isolation, and sorrow. His voice, when it came, held quiet intensity, a whisper loud with significance. "I've spent a lifetime running from memories too painful to share," he began softly, words weighted heavily by truth long concealed. "But hiding changes nothing. Silence protects no one." Arthur took a deep breath, eyes clear yet weary, gazing deeply at George, and the investigators gathered carefully behind him, each holding their breath silently. Arthur's words carried profound significance, breaking gently yet powerfully the silence he had worn as armor for so long. "What happened that night?" Arthur's voice broke softly, emotion surfacing gently yet forcefully. "We were innocent men, but innocence wasn't enough to shield us from what we saw. It changed everything. Our lives, our futures, even who we were." He paused again, the weight of truth clearly heavy upon him. Slowly, resolutely, Arthur lifted his gaze once more, looking directly into the eyes of those who'd sought him, waited for answers patiently, tirelessly. Then quietly, firmly, Arthur asked, voice gentle yet profoundly significant, filled deeply with meaning carefully hidden until now, "Are you ready to hear everything?" Arthur stood quietly beneath the fading twilight, his gaze distant yet steady, eyes fixed upon memories visible only to him. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, each word carrying the weight of the years spent hidden beneath shadows of guilt and fear. "That night," he began slowly, "the ocean was calm at first, deceptively quiet, the sky clear, stars like scattered diamonds, offering no warning of what awaited us. Jacob wanted a better catch, further out, beyond familiar waters. We sailed smoothly, nets ready, unaware we were sailing toward truths never meant for our eyes." His voice paused softly, burdened by images replayed endlessly in solitude. Arthur took a slow breath, gathering strength before continuing, each word deliberate, chosen carefully. As midnight passed, we saw lights, dim, flickering lanterns, in the distance, signaling secrecy rather than welcome. Jacob turned Esperanza's lights off immediately, sensing danger. Drifting closer, we heard voices, saw shadowed outlines of ships meeting quietly under the cover of darkness. Men unloading, heavy crates, whispers urgent yet indistinct. Arthur's hands trembled slightly, his eyes haunted by visions resurfacing clearly. Then, beneath moonlight briefly unveiled by passing clouds, we saw faces, familiar, powerful men, officials from San Diego mingling secretly with known smugglers. We realized immediately we'd stumbled upon something dark, dangerous, corruption woven deep within the very fabric of our city. He paused again, tension thickening the silence around him. Before we could turn away unnoticed, a voice shouted sharply, commanding pursuit. Engines roared, ships racing toward us. Panic surged through Esperanza, our peaceful vessel suddenly, trapped within a nightmare unfolding swiftly. Arthur's narration became urgent, reliving vividly the desperate moments. Jacob steered frantically, calling for us to hide below deck. Tom shouted, gathering us hastily. Miguel, usually full of laughter, was silent, face pale. We hid behind that hidden door Jacob installed quietly years before, a precaution against pirates, never imagining we'd ever truly need it. He breathed deeply, eyes closed briefly. We stayed quiet, hearing footsteps, threats shouted angrily. Above, men boarded Esperanza, searching furiously, our breaths shallow, prayers whispered silently. Eventually they left, convinced we'd fled into open waters. Arthur's voice quieted, filled with heavy sadness. Days passed hiding in that cramped room, hungry, frightened, hope fading slowly with each passing hour. Jacob tried reassuring us, but even his calmness wavered. Miguel joked weakly, trying to lift our spirits, but the jokes fell softly, powerless against fear. Arthur's voice lowered painfully. Then the storm arrived, violent, angry, waves towering furiously. Esperanza creaked, groaned, tossed relentlessly. We held desperately to each other, decisions made hastily amidst chaos. Jacob ordered us above deck, hoping to stabilize our battered ship, but the ocean refused mercy. His eyes darkened, voice breaking softly. Waves tore Esperanza apart, wood splintering, cries silenced abruptly by crashing water. I saw Miguel swept overboard first, eyes wide in disbelief. Tom clung desperately, calling Jacob's name before another wave took him silently into darkness. Jacob and I held tightly, fighting hopelessly against waves determined to claim us. Arthur paused, tears filling tired eyes, voice a whisper trembling softly. The last wave separated us. I screamed Jacob's name, reaching desperately, but darkness took me instead, pulling me beneath violent waters. I awoke days later, rescued quietly by fishermen unfamiliar, their kindness offering shelter but never true safety. He sighed deeply, decades of guilt surfacing painfully. I chose isolation, believing my silence protected others, yet silence only prolonged suffering, truths hidden unfairly from families deserving closure. His confession complete, Arthur's shoulders relaxed slightly, relief quietly visible. Investigators listened quietly, deeply moved, understanding finally the heavy price Arthur paid, protecting secrets believed necessary. Returning to San Diego, investigators swiftly pursued Arthur's revelations, uncovering extensive corruption, prominent city figures arrested, shocking residents, trust broken painfully yet necessary for healing. Families received answers long awaited, bittersweet truths offering closure tinged deeply with sorrow yet relief. Sarah wept softly, holding Jacob's photograph gently, whispering grateful yet sorrowful goodbyes finally possible. Miguel's friends laughed quietly, recalling fondly jokes never forgotten, grateful his memory now free from unanswered questions. Tom's cottage became a gathering place honoring quiet strength, remembered respectfully. Community wounds began healing gently, truth both painful and necessary for moving forward. Arthur's return proved complex, adjusting quietly yet profoundly difficult. San Diego had changed dramatically, technology unfamiliar, pace overwhelming. He wandered streets cautiously, eyes wide yet guarded, startled often by noise, crowds, humanity itself. Yet slowly, gentle patience from community members guided Arthur through adjustments patiently made, each small triumph quietly celebrated. Sarah visited often, conversations quiet yet deeply meaningful, memories shared gently, healing mutual, wounds silently carried. Her daughters visited, now mothers themselves, offering Arthur gentle understanding, connections forged softly yet powerfully through shared histories and compassion. George Brennan visited regularly, quiet conversations. Between men whose lives intertwined mysteriously yet profoundly, shared silence became comfortable, mutual understanding communicated wordlessly, gratitude flowing softly between detective and survivor, each recognizing the other's courage quietly demonstrated. Arthur gradually found comfort near the ocean, sitting quietly each evening, watching tides softly erase footprints left during long walks. The sea offered peace yet reminders quietly persistent, truths now acknowledged openly, yet memories lingering permanently, waves whispering softly of lives lost yet never truly forgotten. One evening, George joined Arthur quietly. Silence shared gently before Arthur spoke thoughtfully. "The ocean," he began softly, voice filled with quiet reflection, "is keeper of countless secrets, guarding truths patiently beneath waves, revealing them gently when time finally allows." George nodded silently, understanding deeply Arthur's meaning, each man contemplating quietly the weight of truths revealed, lives forever changed by honesty finally granted freedom. Arthur's eyes gazed quietly toward the horizon, voice gentle yet deeply reflective. "The ocean chooses stories carefully, some truths freed easily, others remaining beneath waves eternally, their silence necessary protection from pain too profound." His voice lowered softly, thoughtful yet deeply emotional. "Perhaps some truths are better left beneath the ocean's gentle protection, remaining quietly guarded beneath tides unwilling to surrender them." Arthur's words lingered softly in evening's quiet embrace, truths gently acknowledged, each understanding clearly yet silently the profound wisdom held within Arthur's quiet reflections. George placed a gentle hand upon Arthur's shoulder, communication wordless yet deeply meaningful. Quietly, gently, night descended softly, stars emerging carefully, ocean whispering gently its endless truths, secrets held beneath waves carefully guarding mysteries both beautiful and heartbreaking. Arthur remained quietly thoughtful, peaceful acceptance finally settling gently within him. As twilight softly faded, Arthur whispered quietly, deeply reflective yet gently hopeful, voice carrying quiet wisdom earned through years, silently endured beneath isolation's gentle protection. "The ocean chooses its stories carefully," Arthur whispered softly, voice gentle yet profoundly significant. "Perhaps, only perhaps, some truths should remain quietly beneath waves, eternally guarded, gently protected, forever hidden beneath." The ocean's silent embrace. And in the quiet embrace of evening's gentle darkness, Arthur's words echoed softly, truths recognized profoundly yet quietly, acceptance finally granting peace gently deserved, silence offering quiet redemption, finally embraced beneath stars gently watching from above.